Hey everybody, this is Ibarionex from the Candid Frame. When we're making photographs, we obviously have a subject, but we also have a background. And one of the weaknesses that I see in a lot of photographs that I critique is that people are not paying careful attention to what's in their background. They see their subject very clearly, but they're surprised later on when they pull up the image on their computer that there were objects or elements in the background that proved distracting or that pulled the viewer's eye away from the subject. And I think photographs that are really effective, that really sing, are usually created by photographers who are hyper aware of everything in their frame. Not just their subject, but the foreground, the background element, even the things that are along the edges of the frame. It's this sort of hyper consciousness of everything that is happening in your composition that I think is essential to not only make a good photograph, but to make the kind of photograph that people are lured to linger on and to really explore in the frame. And I've chosen 3 images that allow me to talk more on that point. Before we begin, I want to remind you that I'm going to be doing a couple of workshops this year. The first one is going to be in June, and that is going to be at StreetFoto SF. It's going to be a 2-day workshop on June 9th and 10th. And I'm also going to be in New Orleans through October 11th and 14th for a 4-day workshop. In both workshops, I'm going to walk you through my personal process for producing street photography, and there's going to be ample time for the kind of critiques that you're used to on this YouTube channel, but we're going to be doing it in person with the images that were created during our time in each respective city. So if you want to sign up for them, go to thecandidframe.com or click on the link in the notes below. Okay, our first shot is by Gisele Duprez. This was made with a Fuji X100F, 1,000th of a second, f8, ISO 200. So here we have a shot where the subject is this little girl that's on this carnival ride. And she has this wonderful expression, great body language, the hands are really wonderful. We have the ride itself, this sort of rocket ride, and we have these brilliant colors of red and blue and white, the lines and shapes that encapsulate her in this area here in the lower right hand quarter of the frame are really striking. It looks like there was a little bit of flash used here, and it really is used to great effect because it draws our attention to the anchor of the image, this little girl, this ride, this moment. Then we also have the Wonder Wheel in the background, which firmly establishes that we're in Coney Island, New York. The Wonder Wheel is the iconic, sort of linchpin of that entire area, and it's been in countless photographs for probably 100 years or so. It's a wonderful place to photograph. I hope to go there again next time I'm in New York. But you can see here that the relationship between the subject, the girl in this rocket ride, and that background element really play off of each other. It not only establishes a sense of place, but you also see the importance of the graphic nature of this shot. We have these lines here, we have the shapes of the stars, and then we have the shape, these triangles that pervade the entire Wonder Wheel. And then we have these sort of almost rectangular square shapes of the cars that are carrying the people around and around. But you can also see the underlying shapes that are created by this back and forth between either red and yellow or blue and yellow. We also have some of the elements here in the background, this building in the background. We have a sign here that reinforces the fact that this is the Wonder Wheel. Everything in this frame is meant to play off of each other, and it does so nicely. We have this figure in the lower left-hand corner, this guy that seems to be on their phone. It's not the greatest element to have here, but it's such a small, inconsequential element in the frame that it doesn't ruin the shot for me in the least, because the anchor of the shot, the girl, the ride, the Wonder Wheel in the background, create just a really strong, effective photograph. This moment is so wonderful because of all the reasons that I've just illustrated. But note that in a lot of the shots, especially if you look at some of the shots that are in the Flickr Pool, you'll often find that we'll have a shot which has a really interesting subject, but the background doesn't really add to the experience of the subject. If anything, some of those elements in the background are just distracting. And I think the reason for that is that most people are not paying attention to what's in their background. They're looking at their subject, they make the photograph and they only look at what was in the background later on, where they're chimping their image or when they're looking at their photograph on the screen. And what I'm suggesting to you is to slow down and to really be aware of what's behind your subject. What is serving as your subject's background? And is it, the most ideal choice? Can you make some decisions in terms of focal length, in terms of where you're standing, your choice of aperture, to help control how that background, whatever it is, impacts our experience of your subject? Okay, here we have a shot by Gerry Orkin. We don't have any XF data here. So here's an image that is purposely exposed so that it is exposing for the highlights and allowing the shadows to go dark and black. We have some strong directional light coming from the left and illuminates this man's face who's on the phone and this woman's hair who's facing away from the sun. Now, by exposing for the highlights and probably, enhancing that contrast a little later in Photoshop or Lightroom, that contrast between light and dark is dramatically increased, so that the only details that we see of this woman is just this long flow of hair in the back of her shoulder here. Now, they're not on the same plane. One subject is in the foreground and the other one is in the background. But see how they play off of each other. As a result of the choices that he made with respect to exposure, he really eliminated what likely would have been a lot of other distracting elements, maybe in the background, certainly in terms of what was happening here on the shadow side of the woman's face. By limiting the tonal range of this particular image, the photographer is making the choice of saying, hey, I only want you to look at these sort of key elements in the scene. I want you to pay attention to this man's face, the gesture of his hands, the light on the collar of his shirt, and how it plays off of this mane of blonde hair that's on the right side of the frame. But it is the relationship between the foreground and the background here that makes the shot. If he had just made a shot of just the guy alone and there was nothing else in the frame, it would be a very simple shot to read. Or if it was just a shot of the woman's hair, it would be an interesting photograph because of the light, the contrast between light and shadow. All of those things really make the shot really interesting. But if you only had those individual elements in the frame, I don't think the image would have as much depth and it wouldn't call you to sort of linger on the shot in the way that this does. Having multiple elements in the frame to play off of each other allow your eyes to sort of do this dance back and forth between the foreground and the background element. And it forces the viewer to look at it and start thinking about what's the relationship between these two. And there may be no relationship between the two people at all. I mean, they're just passing each other in the street. But as a result of the way that he's composed the image, the way he's exposed it, the way he frames these two elements within the context of his composition, all of a sudden that there's an implied relationship between these two figures, these two graphic elements in the frame, and it results in a much more interesting image. It's not just a photograph of a single thing in the frame that is of interest and a bunch of other busyness in the background or the foreground that just serves as a distraction. It really calls on you to be conscious of the fact that everything in your frame is going to have a relationship to each other regardless of whether or not you're conscious of it. If you're oblivious to it, then everything is sort of left to chance. But when you're conscious of it, you're able to make the choice as to what to include and what to exclude from the frame. And that makes a huge difference in terms of the success of your photograph. You're leaving less and less to chance. All right, here we have a shot by Miguel M.A.S. We don't have any XF data here. So here we have a shot in which these boys are playing soccer, and we have this boy here who's wearing the red jersey with the number 15 on it. The ball is between his legs. He has these black sleeves, and he becomes the anchor of the image. One, because that red color is a big visual draw. Also, the outline of his body creates a great graphic element against this white area here in the frame. So this wonderful contrast between this red saturated color, the lines of his body, and this sort of nice space that helps to define every area of his body. And then we also have sort of an interesting gesture in terms of the tension that is created just as he seems to be about to sort of kick the ball. But we also have other elements in the frame here that are on different planes of focus. We have these two boys here who I assume are, getting into position so that the boy in the light sweat top cannot come in and try and block the shot. We have the kid here who's going to play the goalie in sort of this makeshift area in which the ball is kicked. We also have another figure in the distance here who's walking here through the scene. And we have all these other graphic elements here. This like blue curb here, the wall, this structure here of what remains of a part of maybe an extension of this building at one point, this wall here, this line here. And you can see that all of these elements play off of each other really beautifully. I mean, you obviously have the human figures here in the frame that give a sort of sense of scale, not only to the figure in the foreground, but every other element in the space. And then we have the space itself with its really strong graphic lines from the shape of the curb here, the texture of the wall. We have this demarcation here between this area and this area here that goes between a sort of reddish red and a yellow. We have the blue line, the red line here, this blue material here, the shape and the graphic element of this structure here, this square opening here, this triangle here, this other. I mean, this image is rich with different graphic elements. So it's not just about these kids playing soccer. It is also about these kids playing soccer in this really unique space that has its own character. You could probably create this sort of architectural image or this urban landscape image of just this scene here without the kids at all in the frame, just because it has all those interesting elements. But when they play off of the human figures, it becomes that much more of an interesting photograph. And that's what I'm suggesting to you, is by paying attention to a scene as much as you are paying attention to your subject, you increase the chance of being able to produce photographs that really sing. The kinds of photographs that when you look at it, you just can't take your eyes off of them because they offer so much richness. There's something to be said for making images that are simple, but that doesn't mean they have to be boring. And I think that by being exacting in terms of how you compose each of your shots, you make your photographs something that people enjoy taking in and lingering on and really taking pleasure in taking a look at how you see the world. Otherwise, it's just another snapshot, and no one really spends much time on a snapshot these days. Think about how quickly you flip through images on Instagram and what arrests your attention. People who are seeing carefully and not simply snapping photographs just for the pleasure of it, that are the kinds of photographers that we get really excited about. And it's the kind of photographer you should strive to be. All right, hope you found that helpful. If you're not familiar with the Candid Frame is actually a podcast in which I interview photographers about their work and their career. If you go to thecandidframe.com, you'll find all our interviews here. I also do some written reviews. I just recently wrote a review on the film Kodachrome that's now streaming on Netflix. It's a real wonderful film with an absolutely stunning performance by the actor Ed Harris. It's worthy of your attention. I also did a recent interview with Kevin Raber, who is the mind behind the Luminous Landscape website. Really nice guy, and he's been in the industry for decades now, and me and him had a real good opportunity to talk about what the photographic industry has been and what it's turning into. I think you'll enjoy that conversation. So check it out by visiting thecandidframe.com. And if you want to submit images to the Candid Frame Flickr Pool, all you need to do is go to Flickr on your computer, ask to be added, and I'll be glad to do so. Don't try to do it on your tablet or phone. You won't succeed. You'll get a notification that it's a private group. So the only way to get added to the Flickr community is to do it via your computer, and then I'll be glad to add you. I usually get to it about once a week. And if you like what you see in these videos, please subscribe and give us a like, and I'll see you next time.